Thanks for joining us on Coast to Coast Pest Talk.
Big exhale.
All right. What's up, guys? Thanks so much for tuning into Coast to Coast Pest Talk. I'm your host, Gabe Seymour with Pest Patrol, joined here by Andy Sinevsky with Primatech Pest Management. And today we've got kind of a special, bit of an off-the-cuff discussion here. We're going to be talking about some of the, dealing with some of the ramifications of staffing decisions, losing employees, whether you have to let them go or they quit, and just walking through some of the fear and the turmoil that comes along with that. So, yeah, let's jump in.
Yeah, you didn't say your trademark Syracuse, New York. I was waiting for it, man.
From Syracuse, New York.
There you go. Oh my gosh. So, do you want to set the stage with what brought all this up a little bit?
Yeah, let's do it. So yesterday at like 10:40, I let go one of my team members, and we've got a small team. So I've got 2 full-time techs and a part-time tech. So I let go one of my full-time techs. And he was a tech that I really loved. He did a great job for the team. And it was really, really difficult to do that. It ended up basically being he had a bunch of strikes on his driving record, and my auto insurance basically said they weren't going to cover me if I had him on. So, which I'm sure you have experienced before.
Yeah, boy, we drive a ton. I mean that auto policy is huge. I mean that's a big expense for us. It's our insurance in general is number 2 of our expenses, right behind payroll, behind labor.
Yep.
So man, you take a hit on that, and that's a rough one to absorb.
Yeah, and I'm still, being so new, I have all of my initial insurance programs that I started at the beginning. And what I realized just today, because I got some updated quotes that are like pest control specific, and I just realized that I was paying so much money for insurance.
Oh no.
Yeah. But so you recently you had to let somebody go as well recently.
We had somebody that moved on to another
right.
career.
Okay.
Yeah, out of the industry, they moved on to do something else. But every time there's a change like that, boy, to me, we're a small company as well, and it's like a kick in the stomach. I think you feel it more when you're a smaller company. I mean, obviously, for you, it's like what, a third of your production, third of your capacity, kind of is gone, and then you're sort of left holding the bag. How did that feel like that afternoon? You do this, and you're like, okay, you can't be there. Did you have relief? Did you, was it tough? What were you feeling?
I think there's a sense of relief that you don't have to have that conversation again.
Yep.
Because the conversation just sucks, Yeah. But yeah, honestly, total transparency. I got home from the field at like 2:45, 3 o'clock, and I went inside and I literally just gave my wife a big hug.
Wow.
I was like just toast after that. Because we didn't even have like a super long. We had maybe a 20-minute conversation when I let our guy go, and it was all on good terms and stuff. Realistically, because like I said, I really loved the guy, and we have a good relationship. But it was so emotionally draining just to do. It was like.
Yeah.
It was like a day of work.
Yeah.
A day of work inside of concentrated in 20 minutes.
Yeah. Now, for you, the rest of the day, was it kind of a blur? Are you like
Thankfully, I had like a 3-hour long meeting right after that, which was a bit of a distraction. So that was
Okay.
That was a blessing in disguise.
Yeah. Now, does this make you rethink anything? Do you think, geez, is it worth it to have employees? Do I want to add people back? Do I want to just cut back and, you know, what are the thoughts that are going?
Oh,
All the crazy,
all
all
of
the
those thoughts went
Okay.
through my mind.
Yep.
You know me so well. Yeah, yes. Um, the these type of seasons, at least for me in my experience, I've had two other people quit before, and then I had to let this guy go. And there's some of the darker seasons of business where you question, like for me, I'm like, should I just go and get a job making 150K in corporate America, and
Yeah.
like I could live a good life and
Yeah.
not have to deal with any of this?
Okay, so I'll have to say as a point of what's that called, in line with you there. I don't think that there's probably a business person that hasn't had that thought of going, oh my God, what am I doing?
Yep.
This could be so much easier. I could be a great technician somewhere else. Do I need all this hassle? Oh my goodness. So
Yep.
so you came to the answer that it's worth the hassle though. Is that
Well, so far, I mean, at
still
least
early?
between yesterday and today, I decided. No, but yeah, you're going through all those things. For me, I'm thinking about, all right, winter's coming. Do I want to go through all the hassle of training a tech and then have to scramble to get him enough hours?
Mhm.
Or do I want to just carry the 45 additional hours and then try and scramble all the admin stuff I need to do?
Right.
And then, like you and I were just talking about just before the show, that's going to slow down my momentum. I'm in a really good sales groove right now. We're acquiring a lot of new accounts. So if I keep this up, it could really be a great long-term trajectory. Or do I just go out in the field full time? Right? It's like those are the things that I'm
Yeah.
thinking
So
through.
I felt like when you have these changes, you have this existential argument with yourself for me, it's usually like a week. It's like a week long wrestling with the various options,
Yep.
what to do. And I think with a lot of them, there's no like best one. A lot of times it's like, what direction is going to get me the most peace and get us closer to what we want to do, as opposed to like optimal necessarily.
Yeah.
Because like, yeah, you're right. You could be like, okay, optimally, you're going into the slow season. You could bank profit by having lighter staff. And
Yep.
then next season you'll, maybe hire somebody and now you're behind the 8 ball with training or whatever. But there's like all those arguments and it ranges from, you know what, I shouldn't care as much about the staff and just like hire a ton of people and grow like crazy and I'll care about each one of them less, to I'm going to give up and go, bag groceries somewhere. Actually, in New York, we made plastic bags illegal, so you don't even have grocery baggers anymore around here.
Gosh,
So
dang it.
I can't even do that. So, but yeah, I run the whole gamut,
Yeah.
from just giving up to not wanting to care, about the staff as much and everything in between. And I don't think, like you and I don't think we're like totally unique in that.
Yeah. Yeah. I completely agree. And I will say what's been interesting this time is I have a bigger team than I've ever had. Like this time last year, I had 2 less employees.
Yeah.
And so I'm more conscious of that than I've ever been, where when I go through these hard seasons, I'm thinking about, okay, now I've got like a decent number of humans that are relying on me now.
Yeah.
It's not like me and like a tech.
Yeah.
Where like, oh, he's good. He can go get another. It's like, oh, there's 3 people, there's 4 people relying on me to make the right call here. And to some degree, whatever I choose for me to keep pushing forward.
Yeah. And That's absolutely like spot on right there. Because that's the thing that always ends up pulling me forward is, okay, we have a whole staff that's relying on me setting the agenda and setting the direction. We have a customer base that's relying on we're going to be able to keep delivering the services that we're supposed to deliver. And it forces growth. I mean,
Yeah.
you really have no option but to grow as a leader through these challenges. And it's the same as, lifting weights or something. You put heavier weight on the bar and you've got to keep pushing it back up again. So I don't say I welcome these kinds of things, but I think they're necessary. I think you
Yeah.
have to flex that existential muscle to then be stronger moving forward. There's it's like a rite of passage as you're growing a little business.
Yeah, totally. When I was preparing for the meeting with my guy, something that was really helpful in giving me clarity was, and I'd never done this before, it just kind of randomly popped into my head, was uh, I wrote down what are the character qualities that I really need for this meeting, like specifically for this difficult conversation. And um and I came up with patience was one, because I know that once we do this, there's going to be, in this case, I'm giving the guy like a week or so, and as long as I can until I renew my insurance, as long as they'll let me, um, and, and then courage was another one. And when I actually wrote those out, I was like, okay, I can do this. I can exercise courage in this. I can exercise and learn patience. And it made me realize there's a lot of good growth that will actually come out of this, even just personally.
Yeah. Yeah. And not to self plug, if you go back to check out episode 3, where we talk about fear, we talk about some of this. We talk about some of the getting ready, preparing for, difficult conversation, letting somebody go. And that's some of the things we talked about, was writing down, what's going to happen, what could possibly happen. Now, what I'm curious to hear from you is the attributes that you wrote down that you felt like you needed. I guess this is a twofold question. One, are they attributes that you generally have like in abundance, or are they things you feel like you're weaker in? And two, did you find that it helped you steal away those types of attributes when you needed them?
I'll answer the second one first. Yes, I think it was certainly helpful. I think in just providing clarity of when you're dealing with all that fear and uncertainty and all the things, you're like, is he gonna just freak out? Is he gonna like quit today? Is he, like, how is this gonna go? And so for me, it just helped give me clarity of like, okay, there's a lot of stuff on the outside I can't control. I can at least control emotionally where I'm at. I can walk into this with clarity, with a clear head, confidently, propose this thing. I personally feel like I'm decent at patience and not good at courage, but it's something for the last couple years that I know that I'm not good at, and so I've been intentionally pushing in that way. So still bad and slowly growing.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting, because there's like the inverse of what you are. There's the shadow self. I don't know if you've heard of that concept. I think it's Carl Jung, the psychologist, talks about the shadow self, where it's the opposite. And I can't help, I think courage is on the wall behind you.
Yeah.
So yeah, there you go. Your lion right there. Is that because of the Cowardly Lion?
No, I think it's just
he's courage,
just a cool lion.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and I wonder about that sometimes. Is like the things that come to mind are the things you're worried about not having.
Yeah.
You know,
Yep.
it's not the strengths that you're writing down. It's where you feel like I'm weak.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Because the other things tend to, um, you're going to tend to have those in abundance anyways. So you're not going to feel like there's like a deficiency there. Right.
yeah, yeah. And now, what I wonder was, this is kind of interesting, is as we talked earlier about this, I'm pretty sure that if you had asked me things that I think Gabe Seymour is strong in, I would have said those things you just said you're weak in. And I think I even did. I think I told you my perception of you is that like somebody that's brave and patient, and these
You
things
just,
that
you live in New York and not in Portland. That's why.
that may be. It's a long way. It's a long way away. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. So you went through that. You went through the day. How many days until you felt like you got back to quote unquote normal or whatever?
So, yeah, it was so fresh. It was literally just yesterday that happened. So,
Okay. Yeah.
um, I would say I would say more or less I'm back to a good healthy level of normal. But I'm still like I'm kind of in the whirlwind of applications and trying to hire
Sure.
somebody now, and thinking about, okay, now I'm going to plan out the next month of my life to get that training started with them and all that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm in the middle of that whirlwind, but th- uh, just like so many things, sort of getting that initial hard thing behind you,
Right.
I think is probably the biggest step, at least for me personally.
Yeah. I've noticed one of the things that's the hardest, sometimes for me, almost always for my wife, when we have these sort of changes, is that if you are extremely attached to the future that you thought was going to happen,
Right.
that you had a plan. This guy was going to be moving to this next certification, and he was going to be taking over these accounts, and then whatever. You have a whole active narrative life in your mind of how things are going to look. And now somebody just took that and took a hammer to it and smashed it. And letting go of what that story was, and then now actively constructing a new narrative of what your future is going to be. Sometimes people can have a hard time with that, and that can be
Yeah.
a stumbling block, and it can be it's like physically painful to, like, you feel that in your gut of like, oh my gosh, my reality just got shattered, and now I have to rebuild a new reality. For me, I've recognized that sooner as we've gone through this a couple times. I've observed like how my reactions were to these things, and recognizing that, I think it's easier to let go of that and go, oh yeah, that's in tatters, that got destroyed, that doesn't exist anymore, and then go, okay, well now I have the opportunity to start with a fresh sheet of paper and write a new story, and this new story is going to be great too, and it's just going to be different, and just like
Yeah.
accepting that, I think is the important part there.
Yeah. This will be a funny book plug. So I'm reading, I don't even, what's the book called? It's a Jocko Willink book. You know
Okay.
Jocko
Yeah.
Willink?
Yeah. The Navy SEAL guy. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not the extreme ownership. It's the like the manual for discipline or something.
Okay.
It's one of his older books.
Okay.
And a lot of it is totally just kind of esoteric fluff, like, if you don't want to do it, just do it, like that kind of, like
Okay.
it's
Okay. Yeah.
but he has one of the sections on it. He says, when he would go on his missions and bad things would happen, he had trained himself to always respond by verbally saying good.
Okay.
So like,
Yeah.
his assistant would say, we're under heavy enemy fire, and he'd say good. And his point is he was trying to train his mind to always see that, like, oh, this means we can outmaneuver them this way, or we're having this business crisis. Oh, this means it's an opportunity to trim down, or this means it's an opportunity.
Right.
Seeing the opportunities.
Yeah.
And yeah, it just struck me as we were kind of talking. It kind of reminded me of that. Where, like, really a lot of times, and maybe we can even get into some of the insurance stuff that you and I were talking about, because I think it's a great example of this, where a lot of times there's really good outcomes that come from these hard decisions and hard trials that you have to go through.
Yeah, no, definitely. First, what you're saying there, it's all about reframing and
Yeah, exactly.
reframing
Yeah.
the reality, and that's a little what we were talking about a while back when we were talking about team morale. Like a lot of the leader, your responsibility is to reframe for the team meaning and direction, and that's what improves morale. It's the same thing internally, and having that
Yep.
like that EQ, that emotional quotient to understand that inside yourself and then reframe things so that you can keep moving forward. That's really important. Okay, so there was a good side of it, like you were saying, with some insurance things, and I think you're absolutely right. Almost every time when we've had a change like this happen, there has been positives that came out of it that wouldn't have happened if things didn't change. If we didn't have like a traumatic adjustment, like this, where
Yep.
we let someone go or someone quits or whatever, we wouldn't have done those things. Not that that person was terrible or we wouldn't have done great things the other way, but there's these side benefits. So what happened after this for you?
Yeah. Well, what I had realized, and I didn't even, you don't know what you don't know. So I was brand new. I had all these insurance carriers in place, and each thing was different. So my auto insurance was from one person, my workers' comp was from one, my commercial, just because I didn't know any better.
Yeah.
And then so I get it all quoted out through one provider, and they're specifically for pest control. And I'm able to get that quoted out without this employee on the policy, and he had so many points, and it ended up saving me. I just got the quote in just today, like literally right before the show, and it ended up saving me tens of thousands of dollars. So it's like $20,000 plus.
Gosh.
And like you and I were talking about, as a small company, I mean, we're gonna do $400,000, a little over $400,000 in sales this year,
Hmm.
and the profit margin on that is not very high. Like
Yeah.
when you factor in my salary, for a small company, so an extra $25,000 in cash flow is like humongous for
Yeah.
us.
That's awesome.
So yeah, a good practical example of the maybe unforeseen blessing of a hard decision.
Yeah, no, for sure. Do you think that you're going to change protocols or procedures moving
Oh,
forward
that's
at
a
all?
great question. Yep. Yeah, already have. So that's my top two questions is, do you have experience in the pest control industry? And then, do you have any driving violations in the last 3 years?
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
for sure. Yeah, that's a big one. Now shifting gears a little bit with this, it's been my perception that this problem of that everyone, if you're going to grow a company with employees, is going to face. Do you think that this is one of the things that keeps people as one-man operations? Is the fear of dealing with this?
yeah, or maybe they did deal with it in a, to a lesser degree, or they had a lawsuit because of one of their employees, or they broke something in somebody's house, and it ended up. Yeah, I think anytime you add more variables into the system, you've got all these, like, it's pretty easy to control yourself to make sure you don't
Yeah.
get a ticket, and you don't mess something up, or you don't misapply something. It's fairly simple, and it gets more complicated when you have more people. So I totally think that that's a fear, and probably some level of a legitimate fear, because it is hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think you and I would both agree that it's worth it.
So far.
So far, so
How
good.
how did the rest of the team take it? How'd you introduce that to everybody?
Man, yeah, it was tough. It was hard on the team. They're still processing it. They're kind of in the middle of it right now. So
Yeah.
by the time this episode's released, I'm sure everything's going to be more or less back to normal. But we're like one day out of it as of right now. So yeah, it's fresh. One of the team members, she's like, I just want to cry. That was her response. She's just really saddened, and I think this is an interesting thing to discuss as well. From a team dynamic, anytime you let somebody go, I feel like everybody else is thinking like, am I next? Or right? There's like that kind of, even though in this type of situation, it was more or less like our hands were completely tied on it. We didn't really have an option. But I just feel that whenever, and anytime I've ever had to let anybody go at any of my jobs, I've kind of sensed that like for a few weeks, everybody's kind of like, no, I can't.
Yeah.
And that's tough.
Yeah. Now, do you think that it's harder on us as, say, leadership or owner, manager, whatever, than it is on the coworkers? Like they are coworkers and they know they're working for a certain amount of time. Some people are going to come and go. Do we take it harder than our staff does?
That's a good question. I think probably. And we end up, your team, there'll definitely be blowback in terms of, now your team has to, in the interim, they have to cover the slack and that type of thing. But I think by and large, we tend to carry most of the weight from those decisions. At least if we're doing it right, I think we probably do.
Yeah.
But that's a good question. I'm not sure. What do you think?
I think so. I mean, everybody's going to be different, and I know some business owners that I've talked to that they present like they're really cold and callous, and they just don't care, right? They're going to be like, nope, guy wasn't doing it, I fired him. But man, for me, it's like it's gut wrenching.
Yeah,
and I don't think it is as much for the rest of the staff. I think there's some work you have to do to kind of present them with the new narrative of, okay, this is how it's going to look moving forward. Their biggest questions, I think, right off are going to be like, okay, what does this mean for me? What does this mean for the company? What's our direction? Are we off course? Are we still on course? Or, like, where are we going? But for me, it's like, oh my God, everyone's going to quit and leave and be gone, and I'm going to be by myself. Like you have like these thoughts of like
that's
crazy stuff like that. So I think if you're involved and care, it can be harder on the owner. It's
tough. I think that's the nature of taking responsibility, burdening that responsibility is you end up, we talked about it a little bit in one of our episodes where we're talking about how the employer takes a lot of the risk. They put the target on their back.
Yeah.
And that's good. That's for good reason. Yeah, but I think the same is true with these type of situations where you're just shouldering a lot of responsibility. You feel that weight more acutely, and that's probably the way it should be. And if it wasn't us, I think, in like a larger company, it would probably be whoever that manager role is who had to make that call, had to have that conversation, and has to deal with the ramifications of it.
Yeah. I think it probably hits differently with somebody that's a manager.
Yeah.
Because if you're not the owner, if you're not like, invested at that level, you're another employee that has a task. And unfortunately for that day, your task is to let another coworker go, like you're like, yeah, well, it kind of happens. I think there's an apathy that you can afford to have as an employee that you can have.
I'm just doing my job.
Just showing up, doing your work and going home. Yeah. You can take that position. For us, as much as we try to put distance between our egos and our companies, it's funny because we don't have the benefit of wrapping ourselves up in our companies, wrapping our egos up in our companies, but we have all the downside of it. You have all the concern. And you know, I think it's like how I've heard people describe like with their kids. Like it's like your whole ego walking outside of your body and you can't control what happens. And you hope for the absolute best for them, but you know it's up to them. Like they've got to go out of the nest and fly or not, you know, and you got to let them go. And it's a hard thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh man.
Yeah. With all this, the amount of emotional energy that you have to put into this job of, you know, being the owner and running things. This is why I continually harp and go back to, you have got to develop that strength in yourself. Like you've got to develop as an individual a lot to be able to do this job well. I think there might not be an episode we've done that I didn't say, yes, it goes back onto you. You've got to develop individually. You've got to grow your strength. You've got to grow your self-awareness. There's all these soft skill things that are really required to do this well, or it will eat you up. Like you'll find coping mechanisms, but they're not going to be healthy ones. Like you've really got to be a person of like some pretty good character to, in my opinion, run a business right. To like really be an invested owner and run it well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. And my encouragement for, you know, if there's any small business owners that are listening to this, like reach out. When I messaged Andy and I said yesterday, I said, sorry, you know, I had a rough day. I had to let somebody go. And the first thing he sent was, call me if you need anything, you know, posted his cell number. And it's just that camaraderie and knowing that there's people that will listen to you. And like, we know what it feels like to go through that. So if you're a small business owner, reach out to us. We'd love to commiserate and encourage you however we can.
Yeah, and that is definitely something. And I sent that because I know that seat that you sit in. It's what do they say? Heavy is the head that wears the crown, sort of thing. And there's precious few people in most people's lives that you can talk to that absolutely understand what it's like to own a business and run it. And it's everything to you, and you have to let somebody go. You go through these things. You can't talk to your employees about it. Most of the time, I'm lucky. You know, my wife and I have a great working relationship in the business, so I have that to lean on. But a lot of people don't, and it can be lonely. Like you don't have someone else that can really understand. Unless you've been in that, it's really hard to really comprehend the weight. You know, you can go to a buddy who works at a job and he'll just be like, have some beers with you and be like, yeah, the boss is a jerk, you know, whatever. And you're kind of like, yeah, it doesn't really help me. You know,
like I am the boss.
Yeah. Yes, for sure. So, I mean, and that was why I was thinking this would be a great topic for us to discuss, you know, out in the open when it's fresh like this, because you don't hear this directly from people that are dealing with it, like openly, like you were just sharing. And maybe somebody can listen to this and go, oh yeah, you know what? I'm not crazy. I'm feeling all those things. I'm feeling, you know, about quitting and whatever. And it's okay. It's normal. Yeah. You get through it. We're pulling for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. 100%. Cool. Okay. Should we wrap this bad boy up?
Yeah, you know it.
All right, let's do it. Thanks so much, guys, for listening to Coast Pest Talk. As always, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel and give us a review on that podcast catcher, which is your favorite. Wow, whichever one's your favorite. Just a long day, you know. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever. As well as check us out on LinkedIn. We post a lot of stuff, and we actually have a Coast to Coast Pest Talk LinkedIn group. So you can check that out. And if you join it, maybe we'll talk to
you. Maybe. Probably not, but maybe.
Potentially.
Gabe won't. I mean, he's too famous.
That's right. I just, you know.
There's tens of people that know.
There's so many people. Yeah. I get dozens of messages on LinkedIn every year.
Really?
Dozens.
For the whole year?
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Nice.